Europe, taking Europe as a whole, has not been this strong and united for a very long time, and that was clearly the mood in the room, but in the operational planning that goes with it. I'm so sorry, Harry, the second bit of your question.
You said there was a deadline.
Oh, sorry.
What is the deadline for?
Yeah, So the point here is, as it were, a preliminary point to a deal, which is our collective view is that Russia is playing games, that Putin is back to his old playbook, and therefore the pressure needs to go on to Russia to get more seriously to the negotiating table and to have a framework or a deadline, if you like, for responding to what the Ukrainians have already put on the table and what the US is seeking to achieve in their initiative. So I think there's got to be a framework around that. Obviously, we'll discuss that with allies and with the US, but also, and this was a very strong resolve across the room, that now is not the time for pulling back or weakening on sanctions. On the contrary, now is the time for increasing sanctions on Russia to get them to the table to these negotiations, to the hope of a ceasefire and a lasting and secure ceasefire that preserves the security and sovereignty of Ukraine. So that's as it were, the other element of the meeting today. So up until now, very much a focus on how do we defend a deal if we get there. Today, an equal emphasis, I would say, on how do we collectively, as a pretty large group of nations, ensure that we put pressure on the Russians to get to the table, to actually negotiate, and be really clear that they are filibustering, they are delaying, and we've seen this playbook before. Look, I mean, we in the mood for deadlines. I don't want to put a hard deadline on this, but we need to see this developing in days and weeks, not months and months, and we need to move on to that space. But I mean, so I'd say today was that came up, as it were, alongside what we need to do if there is a deal, as part of the big discussion that we had over quite a session this morning. Jeremy from the BBC.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You seem to be describing a very different world or different view of the war to the one that President Trump tells us about. I mean, this is all happening, isn't it? This talk of ceasefires because of President Trump's, first of all, his assertion during the campaign that he could sort it all out in a day. Then it was going to be 100 days. He was a great deal maker. That actually there is a reality here that neither side believed there could be a ceasefire, neither Ukraine nor Russia, that President Putin has made it clear on multiple occasions that actually his view of what should happen is not a ceasefire, but it is either victory through capitulation of Ukraine or victory on the battlefield. Isn't it time, in fact, to actually say, this isn't going to work? We shouldn't be going for a ceasefire. We should be going for something else, maybe more military support for Ukraine that will enable them to make progress on that battle.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that President Trump absolutely clearly wants a lasting peace in Ukraine, and that's directing all of his actions. And in a matter of weeks, he has got both sides, as it were, to a negotiating table, and we've made some progress. Ukraine has clearly put forward 2 weeks ago now its proposal in relation to a ceasefire. What we now need to do, in my view, is increase the pressure on Russia to get to that proposal on a ceasefire, to meet it and to match it as a first step towards a lasting peace. And I think that's the right course, and that's why we are supporting the US in this endeavour. And that is amongst the things we discussed this morning. And at the same time, we have to answer the question, if there's a deal this time, why will it hold in the way that the deals in the past have not held? Because this wouldn't be the first time that a deal has been reached. But what we need to make sure is it's the last time that a deal is reached and not breached and is held to. So that's why we're focusing on pushing forward and put pressure on Russia and answering the question, how would you defend a deal if a deal is in place? And I genuinely believe that is the right course. Everybody wants lasting peace. Everyone wants a negotiated settlement, not least the Ukrainians. They've been subjected to this illegal invasion for over 3 years now. They've been incredibly resilient. Zelensky has led from the front, in my view, over all of those 3 years, and he's now leading from the front again in relation to these ceasefire discussions. Thank you.
Follow up on that, Prime Minister. What makes you so certain, then, that there is a way of persuading President Putin to give up his long-held and very publicly discussed views on the future of Ukraine, which he believes should effectively be part of Russia?
Well, nobody could stand here, and I'm not going to say with great certainty, by date X, we will have got to this point. What I am saying is that this is a process. I believe the goal is the right goal, which is a lasting peace in Ukraine that secures the security and sovereignty of Ukraine. I am not alone in that view, because that is the President Trump's view. It's clearly the view of a group of countries now that we've put together, 30 countries, openly saying amongst themselves this morning that this is the strongest they've seen Europe in a very long time. And they mean Europe and not institutions within Europe. And it is, of course, the view of Ukraine. So I can't stand here with certainty and say, yes, I know exactly what the outcome will be on what day. What I do know is that that politically, if we can provide that leadership, backed up by operational plans, then that is the best chance, in my view, of achieving the outcome that we all want. Chris, GB News.
Chris Hope, GB News. Prime Minister, Russia's today warning of a direct conflict with NATO if your coalition, the Willing, puts troops on the ground in Ukraine. Will you give MPs a vote on your plans before that happens? And if I can quickly ask about the spring statement yesterday, you told us that we'll be £500 better off from the spring statement, but just next week, energy bills go up, council tax bills go up, water bills, broadband bills, TV licence, rail fares go up, plus national insurance for employers, plus fees of income tax thresholds. £500 won't touch the sides of what's facing your voters next week. Are you gaslighting them? And what's your message to them about the cost of living crisis?
Let me take I think ended up being 3 parts of your question, Chris, but fair enough. Look, in terms of what Russia says, we know what Russia wants. It wants a defenceless Ukraine. So it doesn't surprise me that Russia's saying their position is Ukraine shouldn't have any capability of its own or any assistance or help from anybody else. That rather gives away their opening stance on this, and that can't guide us in our response. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves with a vote because we're not at that stage. We are at the stage of turning the political momentum into operational plans, looking at the various options, and then going for the next piece of work with the Chiefs of Defence. But you know my long-standing position, which is if we were to deploy in any scenario on a long-term basis, then of course Parliament should have a say in that, and I don't deflect from that. Look, on the people being £500 better off, it's not me saying that, it's the OBR. And that is really important because we said that we would improve living standards under a Labour government, and that is what the OBR says we are doing. And obviously their calculation takes into account other factors. That is materially different to the last 14 years. If there's one thing above all else that singles out the last 14 years under the Tory government, it's that it was the biggest downgrading and reduction in living standards in generations. So that is really important. And of course, alongside that, interest rates are coming down. If people are on mortgages, that makes a material difference. Wages are up higher than prices. So in terms of what people feel in their pockets, that's a really important measure. And of course, for those on the lowest income, that's 3 million people, they will have that hike in the minimum wage. So what we're doing is, in answer to your question, securing our economy, taking the decisions that are necessary, seeing that impacted in the OBR's assessment that people will be £500 better off, so living standards will go up, very important. But at the same time, because of the investment we made in the NHS and others, we've seen 2 million additional appointments in the NHS. We said we would do that in the first year of a Labour government. We've done it in 7 months. For 5 months, waiting lists have come down, even during the winter. So I think we can be clear that the decisions we made in the budget were the right decisions. They were tough, but they were right, and you can see now some of the effects of them. Thank you very much, Chris. I've got Ulysses, I think, next.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Bonjour.
French television, BFM TV. Emmanuel Macron just said that you are going to co-pilot the military support for Ukraine, and you announced that there will be a mission in Ukraine with the British and French Minister, maybe of Defense. So are you the co-pilots with Emmanuel Macron of what's being done to reassure Ukraine of the support of the European nation? And also, Emmanuel Macron this morning again explained how he sees this force of reassurance, this European force. So how would you describe this force? What is he going to do if it happens? Macron spoke about, sending troops around big cities and around military bases, strategic bases. How many military do you see joining this force, and how many countries would participate? Thank you.
Well, this morning, the group of countries asked Emmanuel and me to sort of lead the coordination of the efforts that we have touched on this morning. Now, that is obviously something we do in conjunction with and in liaising with all of our partners at every level. But it's really just to take that effort forward and then to take it into the next stages, the Chief of Defence meeting that will be happening in Ukraine, and to ensure that we keep the momentum going in the group that we've been able to put together. But let me just be really clear. This is a group of countries that are coming together in this way because each and every country represented, each and every leader is taking that leadership role at a crucial moment. And in a sense, I would say collectively, rather than I wouldn't focus on individuals, I wouldn't focus on Emmanuel or myself, I would say as a group, we are answering the question, which was, should and can Europe step up, to which the collectively is, yes, we should, yes, we can, and yes, we are stepping up. And that's why I think the mood was of a stronger group and a broader group this morning. On the way in which the one aspect of this would work, and I say one aspect because there was a broader sense this morning that this is, of course, about Ukraine, but it is also about the future of security and defence in Europe more generally. And that's why the mood was very upbeat and determined. And in relation to Ukraine, I would describe this force as one. I mean, the first thing is we need to make sure the Ukrainian capability is as strong as possible. It has to be built on that. There's this idea of a porcupine strategy, which is making sure that Ukraine is in the strongest position. They've got an incredible fighting force now. They've got 3 years' experience in conflict on the front line. So building that capability, maintaining and building on it, but also putting this, I would say, I say coalition of the willing, I mean, this is a force designed to deter in order to send that message to Putin that this is a deal that is going to be defended. That's, I suppose, the best description of it. We're familiar with that, obviously, in other countries in Europe, but that is done in the recognition that we also need US involvement in that. Thank you very much. I've got Kieran from Guardian. Oh, well, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so we've had 30 countries at the planning meetings. Different countries are putting forward different capabilities in terms of where they are able to contribute, and that's why we've broken this down into different planning scenarios, land, sea and air. But many countries are coming forward. I won't go into all the plans for reasons you'll understand, but when you've got 200 planners from 30 countries who are there voluntarily, you know, that nobody can force them to be there. They've come along to be part of this, to say what capability they're prepared to put forward, which is a good thing. And some might have said months ago we wouldn't have got that far, but we are making progress. Thank you. Sorry, Kieran.
Yep. Thank you. Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. Overnight, President Trump announced his intention to impose 25% tariffs on cars and car parts coming into the US. Did he give you any notice of that? Does that make you pessimistic about the chance of signing a US-UK trade deal? And what happens if that trade deal doesn't come about and we do get hit by these tariffs?
Well, look, I think the tariffs are very concerning. There's no doubt about that. And I'm really clear in my mind that the sector, the industry, does not want a trade war. And that's why, first and foremost, we've got to work with the sector, work with industry in our response in relation to this.